interesting thinking about, like, I feel like in approaching art and social change, the like missing word is politics, you know, because I think that when you're talking about like hacktivism, drawing upon the activism model of the 60s, I mean, I think that there's a way that open source has become like a metaphor for how we kind of, you know, use our technology and networks and such. But a lot of times the art that's created isn't necessarily overtly political, and not, I guess I'm kind of talking in vague terms, but I'm actually thinking of Jeff's essay from December 2010, where he argued that culture is more important than politics in terms of creating social change or enacting it. And maybe I guess you could talk a little bit more about that and how art and politics and social change kind of fit together in that way.
Yeah, I don't know if we'd say that culture is more important than politics, although I certainly think it is. There's a lot of people in politics who'd be like kind of offended and wouldn't buy me drinks, so I don't really say that. But I guess, you know, one of the things that a lot of us have been thinking about and I think pursuing is the notion, and it's a simple notion, the idea that cultural change always precedes political change, that cultural change always precedes social change. So in the article we talk about examples, you know, Jackie Robinson takes the field in 1947 in Dodger Blue, 7 years before Brown versus Board of Education. Ellen DeGeneres comes out on TV 13 years before the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And you could talk about hip hop and the multiculturalism arts movement before that, you know, sort of changing American, sort of in a mass sense, vision of who could be president. So you literally have a man with, you know, black roots in Kenya and white roots in Kansas. I love the metaphor of gray area and also the intersection. I just love those metaphors. And then suddenly he's rendered in red, white, and blue, and somebody slaps the word hope under that, and you've got, you know, an image that actually inspires a whole host of other images so that you can go down to the swap meet and buy 14 different T-shirts of it. And you know, it's the type of thing where you always see these kinds of things happening in the culture when there's going to be a big shift. So I think that the culture is sort of the place where our consciousness can be moved. And we quoted, Brian Komar and I wrote this article for the American Prospect called Culture Before Politics, and we quoted Abraham Lincoln, of all people, who said something like, and I'm paraphrasing, that public sentiment is the most important thing, and that the person who molds public sentiment is therefore more important than the person who's actually molding policy. Because with public sentiment, you can make things possible. And in fact, with art, with cultural change, you can actually make things feel inevitable in a lot of ways. So if you look at it that way, then artists are in fact just as crucial to the process as people who we elect to office. And in some respects, we elect people to office and then we don't get the change that we need. So Obama's now the deporter-in-chief. He's deported more than 1 million people at a faster rate than any president in history. And so KAMAU and I were part of this large delegation that went to Arizona in September, 50 artists, and our whole thought was we need to go there, bond with the people who are there, and then we need to be able to uplift those stories and tell those stories, because that's the way that we enact a cultural shift. When you get down to the policy arguments, it's, you know, how many people should be let in, how many people should be deported. So the questions are kind of very narrowed at that particular point. But when you're dealing with an artistic process, you're dealing with the open source, you're dealing with the source, and the questions are much more open. You can change the imagination at that level in a way that when you get down to the nitty-gritty of public policy, you can't change it anymore. And so I think that that's kind of the theory that we've been thinking a lot about in terms of how we, as artists, can affect and impact the way in which people see the world, and then the way in which we all live together.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm curious then, though, what you think about what the political ends have been. You know, so like, you know, if culture is a place where, you know, people can really like push ideas forward, like, you know, when they do polling about gay marriage, you know, overwhelmingly young people support it, and I think that, you know, a lot of it has to do with the modeling that you've seen on, like, in pop culture, you know, like, you know, I mean, I think that's really important stuff, but it's interesting, though, that the politics itself doesn't always reflect what can be seen as a popular or cultural idea. I wonder why that is, or like, is it that people that aren't channeling that correctly, that maybe progressive politicians aren't channeling the cultural ideas well enough?
I think that we think of culture as secondary to politics. So it's even in our language. We talk about politics as hard. So it's hard like this table, right? And culture is soft. You know, culture is just soft, fuzzy stuff that we kind of mess with. So normally what happens is politicians will call artists, you know, 2 days before the rally that they're about to have and say, hey, can you sing a song for me? Or, yo, can you make me a nice poster? What's interesting about the Hope campaign is the Obama campaign didn't want them to make the poster at first. And they said, well, okay, you guys can make it, but we don't actually want to endorse this at all. This is not going to be an Obama campaign thing. And they said, cool, because we can go ahead and do whatever we want to now.
Yeah.
And they went out and they literally raised millions of dollars, like in a sort of tumbling domino type of effect, in a literally viral type of effect in the way that cultural change happens. I never will be the person to say that culture is the end. Culture is only part of the solution. And so again, you know, we elect this dude into office, he goes and becomes a deporter-in-chief, and here we are in Arizona, you know.
Yeah.
At some point, what happens is the artists go to Chicago, and they go to the Obama headquarters, and they have these posters with Obama's face in it that imitate the Hope posters, and that says, stop the deportations. And that ends up on the front page of the New York Times, and then suddenly Obama's administration is talking about changing their policies. So that's sort of a direct intervention that artists can make. But the larger thing is, how do we get up in there and shift it so that you can't ignore it anymore?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's like the larger question.
Yeah. Well, KAMAU, as an artist, you know, who is working very much in this vein, you know, like you started a Laughter Against the Machine tour and documentary with a few other similarly minded comics. I guess I'm curious, tell us about your project and how you view your role.
Well, first of all, I agree with everything Jeff has said throughout his life. Just a coincidence. Ditto. But for me as a comedian, it's funny you say it, as an artist, comedians aren't usually considered to be artists, for better or for worse. And a comedy club is not considered to be a place where good art happens. That's me saying that. So once I decided to sort of try to take, actually, no, the truth is, once I felt like, well, I'm never going to make it as a comedian, I might as well try to do it my own damn way. I started pursuing venues outside of the comedy club space, where I could control, where I knew everybody came in the room was there for what I wanted them to see, as opposed to people who just came to get drunk and eat nachos. I love Cobbs and the Punchline.
Please.
Yeah, no, but so for me it was like, once you get in that space, you can push the art form in ways that you can't push in a comedy club. And it became very clear to me that I suddenly had like opinions about things, and I didn't want to be beholden to laughter every 10 seconds, and I also didn't want to necessarily, I might find myself in dead ends and try to work my way out of it and be with an audience that was more patient for that. And through that came my solo show, the WKMI Bell Curve, and now Laughter Against the Machine, where the whole idea is that we want to be like Nato Green and Janine Brito. We all have curiosity about all these issues, but normally when comics do political material, they're reading from the same newspaper you're reading from, or the same internet site you're reading from. And we were like, well, what if we actually went to these places and actually tried to learn for ourselves? How would that affect our material? And so that's why we hooked up with Culture Strike, because we were like, you know, suddenly we're in Arizona crossing the border twice in one day and talking to priests and border officials, and I'm like, this is not what most comics do. And it doesn't make us, let me be clear, it doesn't make us any, I'm not saying it makes us better.
It does.
Well, okay. Again, I agree with Jeff. Because as I say, like, comedians don't get points for degree of difficulty. Like, wow, that was really hard. They had to go to Mexico for a picture. And we're also in a dangerous space. We're in a dangerous space, not that in that if we get these things wrong, the people who sort of want us to get it right get really hypercritical. You know, so if you don't hit that target correctly, and this happened to me several times where like I go, man, blah 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 deportation, and somebody's like, oh, that's not how it works at all. I'm like, but the joke was funny. But I respect that, and I go, okay, my job is to get it right, and this is the way in which I choose to do comedy. But it's certainly not. It certainly doesn't make it easier, you know.
Yeah.
But it's certainly the way that me and the comics who are like, these comics that we're trying to cultivate, because there's no real name. Political comedy, and I go to LA and people say, don't call yourself political. Like that's the industry says that, because they think that does not sell. And they may be right, but it puts me in a difficult position to have to sort of, like right now I'm working on a TV pilot on a show, on an idea for a show I had, and I'm really finding myself having to wrestle with the idea that like, I don't care if the joke is funny if the point doesn't make any sense. And they don't think about that, they don't generally think that way at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that it's a different understanding of your job, you know? Like, I think a lot of comedians would say my job is to get laughs, you know? That is...
That's ridiculous. No, I mean, at the end of the day, which is no reason for raising, my job is to get laughs too. I can't do something and go, oh, that was smart, wasn't it? If it doesn't get a laugh, it doesn't exist as a joke. Right. So it's just the way in which I choose to try to get laughs. And I'm not, you know, I'm sort of holding myself in NATO and Janine and several of the comedians around the country, holding ourselves to a standard that most comedians aren't holding themselves to.
Yeah.
Which, you know, their way is easier.
Yeah.